Simon tells me it's 6 o'clock, so it must be 6 o'clock, which means we can start. Welcome to this evening's Cabinet meeting. A special one for inverting Queen's Joint Cabinet first one. Well, I hope you enjoy your time as a member of Cabinet. The first item on the agenda this evening are the minutes of the meeting held on the 1st June 2022. Is it your wish that I sign those as a true and correct record of ownership rights? Item 2, apologies, absence. I've not received any apologies about absence, although Becky Whitby has one of her children's got a school appointment, and so she might be a few minutes late. So you accept her apologies for her late entrance. It's not intentional. Item 3, declarations of members' interest. Any? No. Good. Item 4, questions by members of the public. I've not been notified of any questions. And I've not been notified under item 5 of urgent items of business. And so we move to item 6, which is the right to address the meeting. And the following list. I'll see if I can do it all in one breath. I'm like a manager. Item 7, Councillor Shaw. Item 8, Councillor Lamb. Item 9, Councillors Shaw and Carr. Item 11, Councillor Smart. Item 13, Councillor Lamb. Item 14, Councillor De Cara, and item 16, Councillor Shaw. Have I missed any? Thank you. So without further ado, we'll move to item 7, which is the Recovery and Stabilisation Programme. Shall would like to talk.
Good evening, Councillors Preston, officers. This lovely warm evening. I'd rather be somewhere else, I'm sure you would as well.
Yeah, I was sitting in the car. I thought I'd have to stay there because the air conditioning was good.
At least this room has been quite cool this week, so yes, this is really for the benefit of the rest of the Cabinet. I think Robin, you've heard what I have to say about the Recovery and Stabilisation Programme. It's just for the sake of actually getting it recorded in the minutes, if at all possible. And so we recently had this meeting of officers, and Councillor Tutt was there, and the concerns that we had emanate around page 12, and that's Appendix A, which is all the items of the savings that have been made. That's one part of my discussion. And the second line there is 936,000 pounds there. And our question to the Chief Finance Officer was, that's a rather large sum which perhaps needs some explanation. And I have to say that about 4 o'clock this evening, we have received a breakdown of this £937,000, 937,000. And a fairly large amount in there is 750,000 worth of housing benefit subsidy. One still wonders as to why a subsidy would count as a saving, unless it was unexpected or it was saving made in the housing area. So it would be quite good to actually try and get an explanation to that. Both Rob and Neil and everybody else have said that the next meeting we will go through each of these savings line by line. But I hope I wasn't the only one who thought that's a rather large amount of money, and how people managed to save it. So that's why I have 6. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. I'll introduce in a minute and just try to explain to you that to start with, the reason that these are budgeted savings. What we're talking about is we set a budget for what we're going to spend. If we don't spend it, we save the money. It can be as a result of cuts in service, it can be as a result of money that we don't need to spend on something, it can be a result of money that we don't have to pay out, that we forecast money to pay out. But they all collectively come under the heading of savings. And that's common practice in local government. It's certainly something I see at East Sussex on a regular basis when I'm there. So it's just a standard format I think you'll find that all councils adopt. Turning to the report of the Recovery and Stabilisation Programme, I'd like to start by thanking Cabinet colleagues and officers and staff for the work that they've done on this. The target was high, and that's a result of the difficulties that we and other councils went through as a result of COVID. We put what I believe was a realistic and ambitious programme for the recovery and reset in place, and you'll see from the report that not only did we achieve, but we overachieved the savings that we had forecast. So that is actually a considerable achievement. There's work still to be done, as we'll see on page 8. The Digital Democracy Project has supported the live streaming of a number of council meetings, starting with February's cabinet meeting. This meeting, of course, is being recorded, so this is good. One of the things, though, that we all need as members to come to terms with is that moving this project, that is part of the project forward, we need to get used to not using paper, but to deal with meeting agendas online, save the financial reports, which I believe, and I know others believe in Charles rules, because we discussed it, the financial reports, we do want to see these hard copy going forward, because it's very difficult to sort of fly through sets of papers when people are referring to a particular line on budget. But the written words, please, or moving forward, we'll get used to dealing with that online. The Appendix A shows, and Appendix A has been referred to, whether we achieved or we didn't achieve. We set a target of 2,258,000 and achieved 2,467,000. So a real overachievement there, which is very good news indeed. We recognise within the report that to date we've delivered over 4.2 million of capital receipts to repay capitalisation, and that's made life considerably easier than it might otherwise have been. We know now that instead of the original 12.8 million of capitalisation, the most we're going to utilise is 7.1, so that's a reduction of 5.7 million. And in the time period, and with the challenges we're facing, that, I believe, is an exceptional result. Recommendations going forward, we're asked on the assets to look at we've been asked to look at all of our assets, we're continuing to look at those, and Strategic Properties will receive reports on that. The recommendations related to commercial borrowing, I'm pleased to see in the report from our finance officer, head of finance, that satisfaction with the value of money that's been achieved. And in conclusion, in June, the Council, June 2022, the update on the responsible assurance review recommendations highlights the significant positive progress that's been achieved over recent months. So again, my thanks to all members and officers for the work that's taken place. Amir, do you want to add anything on financial review?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing further to add, but of course we have got the Amazon report which follows on the agenda, and I think we get more information about financial position of the authority.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, David. And just really to echo the answer to Sean's question earlier on. So thank you for that. Also, thank you to you for the support and also challenge on the cross-party RNS kind of board. It's very much appreciated. I just thought it could help keep us focused. So you mentioned about the breakdown of that policy income saving, and as David said, it's, first of all, it's good news we've made the saving, especially compared to the original overall target of 850k. That cumulative increase that we've made has helped lower the pressure considerably. But really the better news is in the way that we have made the saving. And although trying to summarise something in cold heading can lead to different interpretations, like I said, I guess I'll just bring Tim for you, bring Tim in the chair. But the way we made the saving in terms of reduction of lost subsidy is, you will recall before the pandemic, we had an exponential increase in homelessness in the town. And Tim and his colleagues have done the valiant job of trying to provide rules with their heads. And quite often those rules are emergency conditions. But since then, the fantastic work of the Receipt Initiative, the work that we've done by EHIC and the HRA in building new stop temporary accommodation and working with the private sector partners and housing association reform, has enabled us to increase the amount of temporary accommodation at the expense of emergency accommodation, which is much better financial for us, isn't it, Tim? Because that affects the subsidy that we receive, which contributes large parts of the
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so when we place someone in emergency accommodation, we placement is paid by housing benefit. But due to government legislation to try and reduce the amount of emergency accommodation local authorities use, you lose 40% of subsidy in that placement. So when they pay us the housing benefit back, we lose 40% of that. So as Rob said at the start of the previous year, we had over 230 people in emergency accommodation. So I had a subsidy budget, a budget that covered that loss of subsidy. Homes First reshaping was about a small staff saving, but it was about getting the team to work in a different way so that, as Rob said, we can move people out from emergency accommodation into temporary accommodation where you don't suffer that subsidy loss. You'll note also that we still had a £153,000 saving on DD costs. That's for exactly the same reason. So we took 230 people that were there and took it down to 110 when this budget was there. That's how we achieved saving and obviously improved the outcomes for people with emergency accommodation.
Thank you, Tim. Members of the Cabinet, Steve.
Yes, thank you, David. And not to give too much away before I might be saying a little bit later, but I think this is a really encouraging report which shows, as you said, and others have commented on the amount of work and hard work and a lot of thought that's gone into making sure these plans are achieved. And again, I want to extend my thanks to both members of Cabinet and indeed senior officers, and indeed everybody, I think, at the council on the officer level who have known. We've been drilled into them from both senior officers, directors, service managers and everybody else. And when I speak to somebody, they say we are aware of the restrictions, we are aware of the challenges, we know how difficult it is, but let's see what we can do to work together to solve some of the problems that we've had or some of the issues that we're seeing. And I think that's really representative of what we can do as a council and what we do together. So I really do want to thank officers on every level, from customer first to waste to environment first to homes first to financing. Everybody who's just frankly got us to this situation where what would be the ambitious savings that we've had to do, the income targets we've had, tourism, the ambitious savings and income targets that we set ourselves have we've done a really good job. Obviously, there's some issues that we know in terms of long term and unknown quantity of what the new Prime Minister and his new team that he assembles might consider with regards to, I remember being at LGA conference last week and being told that there'll be a 2-year funding review and fixed term funding, which would give us assurances and guarantees, and then Wednesday night he was sacked. So God only knows what will happen to that next department and that commitment that was made. And that puts pressure on us for the future. And then we've got the inflation cost, we've got the cost of living, we've got the cost of fuel, we've got the cost of housing, we've got the cost of supply, we've got the cost of everything else. So, as I will discuss later on, there are some real inflationary pressures, there's some real cost pressures coming along the lines, but again, working as we have done, both cross-party and indeed with the direction of travel we've got, I think we've done an exceptional job, and I look forward to the future challenges.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, it's been a real team effort. It's all of our officers, staff, and councillors. Councillors had to make some difficult decisions on how to impact our budget that in line with what the money we had available, and the officers have delivered on the time and exceeded it. So, general thanks for that. I'm looking around the room to see if there are any other speakers. I don't see any hands, so I'm going to ask you to accept the recommendations. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. Sorry, there was someone's just drawn my attention to the fact that the scrutiny committee made another request almost for further analysis of the 136,000, that's is fine already, but so we know that that's taken place. Thank you. Then we move to the next item, and I ask Jane to swap places with Shannon, please, and to address us on the cost of living crisis.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I want to start with saying that I am very happy that you've been able to find the savings to inaugurate the cost of living crisis fund, and look forward to receiving the strategy from the grants task group about how people are identified and how help is given. It seems to me quite a very important thing, which is why at the last council meeting I seconded the motion to provide something similar, which was a local fund, but at that point we didn't have access to a savings pot that we could use. But I think it's very important that we respond to what's going on around us. The point I want to make this evening is about a group of people who are very hard to reach. They are people who are not very happy about even claiming the benefits that are due to them, such as pension credits and other reliefs. They're not happy about receiving support from food banks, and some of them are struggling quietly and alone and invisibly to the system. And they're the ones I'm quite concerned about, because we've agreed that we want to tackle the worst affected among our population. And some of these people, because of their invisibility, are sometimes the worst affected, because they're even more disadvantaged by their refusal to accept help and support. I know from Tim that the council works very hard to ensure that people take up credits that are due to them and take advantage of any other reliefs that they're due. But there is a sort of mindset certainly among some elderly people, that they don't want to do it. And I have spoken to people in my ward in Leeds about this and tried to encourage them to take up this, and they just won't do it. And I feel heartbroken about them sometimes, because they're suffering in silence out of a misplaced sense of pride and independence. And I'd like to see the grants task group targeting those people. And I know the officers already do that, but I think that we do need to try and seek them out in some way, because they're not even people who necessarily will go for support to the voluntary sector. And I would like that to be included in the grants task group remit, so that we can ensure that even those most disadvantaged and secret and invisible people are helped, because I think that's our duty as a council, and I know you all agree with that. And that's the point I wanted to make at this meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jane. We do agree with that, I'm sure. The £250,000 that we've managed to allocate is a result of overachievement on the savings targets that we referred to in the last item. Struggle we've been able to put that money aside. We allocated very quickly 20,000 of that to Food Bank, because we know that Food Bank suffered, has incurred an increase in usage in the first 3 months of this year of 78%. I mean, it's just sort of mind-boggling pressure that they're under. But I agree with you very much that there are people who, for whatever reason, either through pride and not wishing to ask for something which they're totally entitled to, or for the fact that they may not understand that the benefits are there, we need to reach out to them. Josh Balarindi ran a cost of living crisis summit a couple of weeks ago at the New Hotel, and Alan and Helen, I know, were there. They may wish to say something about that. One of the, I got there for the second part of that. One of the ideas that came from that forum was, and I gave commitment to the fact that we would do it, we would run a benefits take-up campaign and speak to officers about how we can actually get that off the ground and reach out into communities. And there'll be many channels in order to do that, and you can understand those. There was a tremendous amount of energy at that summit. I was very impressed with the ideas that were coming forward. They came from many individuals and voluntary organisations, and so on the back of that, I asked Josh Balarindi if he would take on the role of cost of living champion, and I'm grateful to him for agreeing to do that. And so when we come to recommendation 2, in terms of the consultation that takes place, I want that not to be just simply with the grants task group, but also with him as a champion. Steve, myself, Robert were up in Harrogate a couple of weeks ago, and there was much discussion around cost of living. It's not something that's isolated, it's not something that is only impacting upon us in Eastbourne. It's something that is a national challenge. But there were many ideas that came there, and so the other thing that I'm particularly keen that we do is to learn from other councils, from other areas, the things that they're doing and they're implementing. Two things particularly struck me. One, which I know Helen may speak about because we've done some of this, or she's done some of this, is provide people with slow cookers. I use a slow cooker quite frequently myself, because I'm never sure when I'm going to get home to eat, and so it works very well for that purpose. But I realised from what other councils said, they've been handing another council's been handing these out, costing about £25 each, and it means people can cook a meal for 12 pence in terms of energy costs, which is a very good way of doing that. Another idea that came out when Robert Sultan had a chance to speak to them, that there were one of these stands there at company that has set up a credit card for charity shops. And so perhaps you might find homeless people being given, with best good in the world, clothes that don't fit them, in the hope to keep them warm and clothed. Instead perhaps of doing that, if the people who make those donations make the donations to the charity shop, and people can supply, or through charities we can supply credit cards that they can spend in those shops, they get clothes that actually fit them, which makes a big difference to their own self-esteem, and the opportunity to actually get it out in the right apparel, and to use it also for other things that they can buy in those shops. But then that money washes through, of course, our local economy, it supports our local charities, And it's not a challenge from the organisation to do that, so I'm hoping that we will actually avail ourselves of their services. So I'm going to stop now and ask other cabinet members. Helen.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to declare my pecuniary interest because I do manage Volunteers Network, which runs on community gardens that may well apply for funding. Yes, the cost of living emergency summit that Josh Fabarinzi organised was absolutely fantastic. It really did gather together all of the organisations, or a lot of the organisations that are working directly in this area. And it was great to really talk about the issues, what the main issues were and possible solutions. Slow Cooker initiative was really well received. Volunteers Network managed to get just under £4,000 of funding, and we bought slow cookers at more or less wholesale prices thanks to a local business, and managed to roll them out through the council and through Food Bank. And as I say, they were really well received, and they're hoping to do some work around teaching using those slow cookers. We have a recipe book we actually got from an Irish council that had put together this fantastic recipe book that actually helps people cook in a way that not only was cost efficient food-wise, but cost efficient energy-wise, which is a huge issue. I spoke to a lady a few weeks ago who, we have lots of bread donated to Gallardo often, and I was saying, you can freeze that, take more than you need and freeze it, and she said, I can't afford to plug in my fridge freezer anymore. So we really are talking about people absolutely in crisis. One of the ideas that came out of the summit is a warm spaces initiative, which would provide places across the town potentially where people can get some sort of free or low cost food offering, possibly a mixture of both, possibly combined with the larders, access to computers and support to access online services, because Councillor Lamb's right in that sometimes, particularly elderly members of our community can't access what they need to in terms of being involved online. They don't know how to do it, and often they have to seek help for that, but actually they're supposed to be doing it themselves and of course can't, so it's a vicious circle. So if we can provide a space which is warm, which will be essential through the winter, we certainly don't want our pensioners travelling on buses to keep warm here. We want to provide warm spaces with food offering and computers for public use and tech support in order to use that. And hopefully if we join that up with signposting to local services and proper information about what they're entitled to, then hopefully that will start to solve some of those problems, or at least reduce them. I'll be happy to talk to you further outside the meeting about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen, and thanks for drawing attention to the disenfranchised group of people that haven't got access to the internet. I spoke about that at County Council yesterday under their state of the county item. And there are a lot of people, I'm very much aware of it because sometimes I will write in my column for the paper how people can get information. I put in the web address, and people have contacted me and said that they haven't got access to the internet. And I sometimes struggle to find alternative methods of putting them in touch with people they want to be put in touch with. So I mentioned it yesterday as something that I think we all need to do, borough and district councils as well as county council, to try and reach out to those people, to actually bring them into the internet world, find ways, affordable ways of doing that, to give them the training that they will need to do so, because it isn't intuitive always. And I spoke also to Tech Resort to see if they can assist with that sort of a program. So what we've got is a challenge which I think we all need to work together to address in order to have the people who are in the greatest need. I really fear for the autumn if the suggested price cap on energy is lifted yet again. I think many people will find it almost impossible to go through the coming winter. That really worries me. Steve.
Thank you, David. There's a couple of mistakes or slight errors in the report. I'm sorry, Simon and Co. So if I can just make sure we just amend them. First of all, 5.1, we said as part of the outcome report, it is suggested to approve the transfer of 350,000 to immediate cost of living support earmark reserve. Cost of living fund of 250 will be funded from this reserve. It is 250. I wouldn't want anybody to think that we're sort of not putting the whole money, and that's really important. We're putting all the 250 into this and doing whatever we can to support those communities. So apologies for that. The other one, and again, it's 1.2. It was agreed by full councillors at the meeting that as long as some broader actions in response to the pandemic, a cost of living emergency fund be established. Whilst we agreed to the motion that was put forward by Councillor Barilla, we didn't actually agree this fund. The fund was done, I believe, under an emergency decision by David shortly after full council, and was after myself, David, and others had spoken to discuss the idea of this grant taken from the outturn report. So whilst a few sort of perhaps minor adjustments really important, because it was frankly due to the excellent work that we did through recovery and stabilisation and the savings and income targets that we achieved, we were able to actually look at this properly and find a really costed way of delivering this one-off support grant for our communities and our funding, and not through the sale of potential council assets in the future, as was suggested by others. But the really important thing is, as always, we've got to reach out, and going back to what Councillor Allen was saying, and I appreciated your comments, we have to reach those communities and those hard-to-hit areas. We have to find a way of really making sure that those who perhaps too proud in the past to claim, those who don't know how to claim can get support. And that's why I really do welcome the suggestion that actually we have potentially a large in every ward. It might sound a little bit strange, and I certainly don't want to encourage the use of food banks or anything else. And you know, it's, as David said, a 78% increase. Nobody should be having to go to a food bank in this day and age. But if they do, they need to make sure they're supported. But actually, a large, I think, is a really good, sustainable way of also supporting. I know I've only visited the Devonshire Library, I must confess, I only visited once. But actually, I was so impressed by what the team were doing there, and their dedication and their passion, but also somewhat saddened by the amount of support that people rely on to go there. But it's sustainable. It's a way of helping people, perhaps, who want to pay something. They don't want to just rely on you know, having to get a hand out. They want to pay something. They just can't quite make ends meet. And actually, this is really important. So anything we can do to support Malawi and work with our local communities to get them established, I think, should be encouraged. And I would certainly welcome any support that we can offer for that. I also agree, you know, and I think one of the critical decisions that we took was to find a way of phasing this, because at the moment, we know it's pretty bad, but my suspicions are that once the cost of heating electricity at the moment is very high, it's quite warm at the moment, so you're not having to have your heater on all day, every day. When we get into winter, that's when those costs are going to really rise. And I think spreading this out so that there's a little bit later on, I think will mean that we can really put together some fantastic proposals and schemes to really help get into the local community. I did read, somewhat regretfully, that there was a little bit of a comment by the opposition to Born Free with regards to the delay in getting this funding out. I read that in a report this afternoon that somebody sent to me. What this is about being diligent and providing due process. But also we said that we want to make this really easy for community groups to get to apply for. And we have a financial duty to our ratepayers and our taxpayers to make sure that the money is spread out fairly and equitably and gets into that community. I don't want to be spending X amount of money and it's not at that targeted support. I will make sure that it goes to those hard to reach places and where everybody knows about it, knows how to apply, and it's really easy and simple. I know working on the past with Tim, with regards to business rates and the need financial hardship support, but there's a really good system that we can develop as part of this. That doesn't happen overnight, but we will have that in place and we will make sure that this is targeted and supports the group. So whilst there has been a rolling down, £20,000 has already been given to Food Bank and a further support will be offered really quickly.
Thanks, Stephen. I have been aware of that comment, but what I hope is that we'll work together as council in identifying those most in need. We'll work with voluntary sector in that cause as well, and we will make sure that this money, might £250,000 might seem a lot of money, when we're trying to tackle this sort of issue. It doesn't really amount to that much, and so we need to make sure that we get that out where it's needed most. So I encourage everybody to work towards that cause. Your recollection of events coincides with mine. I remember at the end of that council meeting you spoke to me and Amira, and I would like to thank both you and Amira for the work you did in identifying that £250,000. It will make a big difference. So, any other contributions, Betty?
Just off the back of Councillor Lamb's comment, and I know it's something that as a council we're all sympathetic with, the people that don't access the third sector would be accessing GPs and social services, and so I think our comms are going to be really important in how we direct it, because as Councillor Lamb pointed out, people, some of her residents and needs may not access food bank. Equally though, they would go to the GP, and the teachers, can pick up on things. They pick up when children are underfed and neglected. So if we could target our support also through the infrastructure, that may help a little. Just a comment.
I think that's right, Becky. As I said, there are many channels that we need to identify, and I'd encourage everybody to come forward with the ideas of what they may be, so that we really do reach out to our community. I don't see any other hands, so if I could thank Jane for her contribution and ask members to accept the recommendations subject to the changes identified by Stephen for the report and the addition of the champion in terms of the consultation. Is that something you're all in agreement with? Thank you. Then we move to item 9, which is corporate performance, and Sharma and Penny on that. Sharma, jump on board, please.
Thank you, so all in all, I think fairly good year-end performance report, and everything knows what I'm going to say. My concerns are twofold. One is the number of KPIs here. And I know Councillor Swanberg, we talked about it last year, but I was quite surprised to have been then sent a paper showing that we're going to go ahead with exactly the same KPIs next year. I think even Councillor Whippy agreed last year that we should really sit down together and look into this, but there we go. It seems like this paper's come to me, and it's a fait accompli now that we're probably going to accept it. One specific area that concerns me is the customer contact area. Now, irrespective of the fact that the KPI number 5 is totally rubbish, which is increase the percentage of calls to the contact centre answered within 60 seconds, I think it's an unachievable target. Not only is it not unachievable, but also unrealistic in my opinion. given that 21-22 outturn is that we answered perhaps 36% of the calls, which I am frankly surprised about, but let's say that we did answer 36% of the calls in 60 seconds. We're now actually advocating putting an 80% target. Now, this just seems unrealistic to me, and as I said, irrespective of the fact that this is the wrong target, what we ought to be doing is a more holistic target, amongst which this would be one of the KPIs. So really, we need to understand customer satisfaction. We need to understand, are our people answering the questions accurately? How have people got the right tools to be able to answer these questions? Are there enough people available to be answering the question? Great, we're making savings, but are we cutting down our customer contact to the bone? And that's an area that I'm really totally uncomfortable about, and I would really urge all of us to perhaps rethink this. So that is one of the things, and the other part of this is not exactly within this area, but we have KPIs 1, KPI 2, which is percentage of council tax collected during the year, percentage of business rates collected during the year. The third thing that should be there is housing benefits overpaid. So at yesterday's meeting, Tim Whelan and Nick Ducatel did a presentation where they explained what's happening over the next year, how the chatbot and other things that IT that we're introducing is going to help us achieve this new target. I still don't believe, hand on heart, that that is achievable. So we now have something around 12.6 million pounds of council tax uncollected, business rates 2.4 million, and overpaid housing benefit of 3.7 million. These are the figures that were provided by Nick. Councillor Holt talks about diligence. I think we need to exercise some diligence in this area. That is my concern around the corporate performance.
Thank you. I'll leave Colin to answer the majority of that in a moment. I'll ask Amira perhaps to get out her calculator, because you're right. We obviously want to get all the money of the road paid to us, but I believe officers are doing everything they can to achieve that. And if the calls that I sometimes get from people who are complaining to me that we've actually sent in bailiffs or anything to go right, we're certainly being robust in that process. My understanding nationally is that the amount of money owed on those areas is something like 4.4 billion. And if my recollection is correct, about 239 councils that are preset that are collecting those amounts. So if Amira perhaps later in this discussion tell us how much that equates to on average per council, I believe it's somewhere between 18 and 19 million. But I'll ask Penny to come forward and swap places with Michelle.
Thank you, Chair. Can I refer you to page 30
Item 19. That's the percentage Tina deliveries on time. Firstly, I was a little bit confused about this, and not difficult, but they confused me. It says, please note that averages from the previous quarter I used until ratified data is available from East Sussex County Council. And I wasn't really aware that East Sussex County Council were involved in delivering these containers, so I was just could do a bit of clarification there. The question I was going to ask is what's being done to rectify this? You know, it's really way off target, and people aren't getting their bins on time, they can't do the proper recycling and composting and what have you. And my second point, and Tim will not be surprised when I ask this, is on item 22, when you get figures, could you send me the breakdown of the composting and the recycling and the residual waste? Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think I know the answer to your question, but I'm going to answer it. As it's portfolio, go on.
Thank you very much. Start at the beginning. It's a good place. Obviously, in the list of KPIs, there's some good performances and then there's some not quite so good performances. But if we start off with the first two, it's the finance percentage of council tax collected during the year. Short-term trend, that's all good. Short-term trend on that is upward. Finance percentage of business rates collected during the year, that's it's a yellow, but the trend is upwards on that one. So I'm really quite very happy with that aspect of what we're doing. As for the number of KPIs as well, it's a strange thing because we to some extent rely on KPIs so that we can see what the performance of the council is. But if Councillor Shaw would like to send me a note perhaps of the ones that she can dispense with, then I guess the officer would be able to dispense with a few of them. But let's see what we've got. At the moment, I'm quite happy that this tells me, gives me a lot of information that I need to judge the performance of the authority. So I'm kind of reluctant to let them go. I've got to talk about the contact centre, because contact centre has been a problem for a while. And there are a lot of reasons why it's a problem, which I suppose we go through again in a sense. The first thing is that the volume of transactions, the volume of calls and the volume of contacts fluctuates enormously. And sometimes the fluctuations take you by surprise. The notes here, this is on page 27 and opposite number 5. The notes here say that let's say the government came out with £150 energy rebate scheme. Of course, the next morning everybody phoned up for it, and the whole place was swamped. And it's just something that is uncontrollable. Not blaming the government, it's just the way it is. It's the way that life works. Another one is the current ongoing one is the cost of living crisis doesn't just mean that people go to the shops and can't afford them. It means they sit at home and worry about it, and then they phone us, and they phone us obviously for things that relate to our activities, events and that's and stuff like that. But they also phone us because they got our phone number and they would like to talk to somebody about the matters that are being discussed. Not that we're necessarily the best qualified people, but we're obvious people to try and support them or try and help them. So that's why it fluctuates. Meanwhile, in the background, we had a really good crew of people who were working in our contact centre. A lot of them left because they got better offers from other places or because we've trained them to do certain jobs. They go to other activities in our own council, which I think is quite an interesting way to do things. But it does mean that we get then, first of all, a recruitment problem. The recruitment problem is actually finding people who can and want to do the job. And the next thing is having recruited them, we've got to train them and get them to do it. I know Tim Wheeler's changed the way in which, once they're trained to change the way in which they operate, there is more specialisation being used now than we ever did. We used to try to aim at a situation where everybody who answered a call could deal with any question that came along and would be able to give an instant answer to instead of having to pass people around. We're finding that that's not necessarily the best way to do it, and so we're experimenting with a bit more specialisation. The other one is chatbot Ellis, which I've spoken to chatbots in my time and I think, okay, and Ellis has a 93% success rate, which I think is my big problem. I think it is, it's obviously the way forward, and it's what people rely on. My big problem is I hope that Ellis doesn't get a better offer from another department, because then we can have to find ourselves a new Ellis, aren't we? So that's where we are in the contact centre. Can't leave this alone without expressing our thanks to all our staff who've been working in the contact centre in the last 18 months or 2 years. It's been tough, and it's been tough because of COVID, it's been tough because of the problems that have been around and the ones that I've just outlined. But they really do turn up and do the job for us as best they can, and I would like to have recorded our thanks to them for that. Okay, just moving on from the contact centre for a little while. Encouraging things, if you look at numbers 8 and 9, sign-ups to social media and people registering their email addresses, this is really what we're after, isn't it? We need to have this level of contact. I know I do have every sympathy with those who can't work the apparatus at all or don't have access to it. I mean, I struggle myself, but that's a slightly different scale of things. But when we got an annual target of 1,800 people's email addresses and we finish up with 12,000, that means we're getting something together. And of course, that's valuable information for next year. There's a couple of things in there. Housing average void relet time, relet time, those were affected by COVID. And the number of licensed HMOs, those were affected by COVID, and still in these figures are still showing as being affected. But we're hoping that those will recover from now on. Although it's not COVID. If you look at the last page of this, page 32, staff average days lost, it's not quite on target. Because COVID's still out there, I should know, because my wife had it last week, which was a bit of a shock. Well, to her, it was a bit of a shock. She had a nice weekend in Cambridge and came back with, it's like suntan and COVID, so it was not impressed by that, really. Some of the bin deliveries, actually doesn't say it on here, I'm not sure why we are relying on the Sussex County Council for things, but Penny, you're a member of it. Is there something that you can do?
I think, Colin, probably, if it's too many interjection, but I think that's a reference to the verification of the percentage of recycling against the residual waste. And so we rely on East Sussex to give us those figures. It's solid.
Okay, I understand that. Anyway, it said we're both members of it, so we could all go and ask them the same question to me if the numbers earlier. Please. Okay. What else have I got? Tim, did you want to say something about housing benefits? Such a surprise.
Thanks, Councillor. Well, it's an interesting point you make, because when we look at customer contact and you look at people making phone calls, that is not just customer contact. Customer contact is us people, as Councillor Swanson said, customer contact is people getting in touch with us, needing housing benefit payments, needing to change their circumstances, needing to pay their council tax. And if you look at the suite of KPIs on the first page, which Councillor Swanson related to, that is the important customer contact. That is where we keep people in their homes by making sure they have benefit paying on top. So I'm really pleased that the team put a bit more restriction targeting for average days to process new claims. Despite the increase in demand, the team met that. change of circumstances, which we've had a lot during COVID, people in and out of different employment, again, another stretching target, and the team for that. At the same time, the delivering government schemes such as the NRT, the Housing Support Fund, the team has managed maintaining collection rate of council tax. So that, for me, is the important customer contact.
Thank you. I've got Steve, Alan, and I'm going to come back to Nira to answer the puzzle comments that Steve.
You always project on, you know, sort of offering puzzles to people just before. I again, thank Councillor Shaw for some of the comments. I actually agree with some of it, which is actually asking how quickly a call is answered is useful, because obviously you want to answer the call as soon as possible. I know when I spoke to you two again at the government conference, actually what I care about is how effective the call is. Did they get served quickly? Did they get served and did they get the right answers? Did they get their benefit issue sorted? Did they get their bin collected? Did something happen? Did they actually get a good result when they called us? A call might take 60 seconds to answer, or over 60 seconds to answer, but a call to the council could take 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, an individual, depending on what their needs are and how complicated it is. For us to sort of, I think we need to put that into some form of context, really. But then again, the problem with that we have yet another KPI. And Councillor Shaw's already suggested that we remove some KPIs, but let's add a couple more. And that's always a bit of a challenge. And we had that in East Sussex just recently. I was with Councillor Swansborough at their audit committee, and we were assessing the risk register. And I started asking questions about, well, how did you make this determination up, and how did you learn this, and how did you know, and what were you doing? And the officers there turned around and literally told me, well, every time we review this, we always get told to add more detail or take more detail away, and this is kind of the compromise we can find. Actually, looking at the list of KPIs we have, I think it does reflect the service and what the key priorities are at the moment for this authority. I think there's always ad hoc ones. You know, I'd be really interested if we've had any new support with regards to the amount of business rates, grant support that was given out by the authority so quickly and so robustly. And then indeed, the 4 or 5, 12 or 13 other schemes that were then released. Plus, let's not forget the cost of living grant that was administered so quickly. Plus, let's not forget all the other additional burdens. And as the team have already identified, the team is still performing in those key 4 areas well within their target area. You know, and look at some of the other things with regards to waste collection. KPI number 20, recycling and waste, missed assisted collections. Annual target is just 1%. Annual performance is 0.5%. Imagine how many bins are collected across Eastbourne every day, and through all conditions, through COVID, through everything else, and yet it has been 0.5%. That is just the number, and again shows the amount of passion and dedication that all of our team put into their service. So I do agree with Councillor Shaw. Actually, perhaps the question we should be asking is how effective are those calls to this authority when people answer? And yes, we want to make the calls quicker, and yes, we want to make the answers quicker, but ultimately I'd rather have somebody waiting a little bit longer than 60 seconds and have a better service from us, because when they reach us, they get the 5, 10, 15, 20-minute response that they might need if it's a complicated case. And let's not forget, this is housing benefits, this is council tax, this is business rates, this is appeals, this is things, this is debt, this is rarely a case of, yeah, thanks very much, off you go now. If it is, that's not a service we're providing. So I know, Tim, when we were discussing at LGA, we were saying there's potentially software and bits and pieces we could include so that after the call, people are asked to rate the effectiveness of their call. I think that would be really beneficial to us, and perhaps that should be the target we measure, not how quickly a 60 phone call takes to hit our service officers.
Thank you, Steve. I'm glad you drew attention to that. I mean, in the business past, one of the things I was responsible for was IT help desk, and I was never interested particularly in how long it took us to answer the call, but how long it took us to resolve the issue. And I know an organisation that use automated answering, and so on the whole 3, the calls are answered. So on that KPI, they're at 100%. And they're actually very satisfied customers, I'm sure. Alan?
I think actually Steve has covered pretty well what I was going to say. I have calls with Tim every week, and amongst the things we talk about are the pressure on staff with all the new systems over the last 3 years. And I think it's absolutely incredible what has been achieved by staff working in benefits and giving out all the new grants and actually staying in the green. So I'd say big congratulations there. And on the first one, we'd all like to see 100% collection, wouldn't we? But actually, let's not lose sight of the fact it's 96.29. You might be led to believe if you only listen to certain facts that the situation was much worse. It's comparable with all local authorities actually. So yeah, I just wanted to reinforce the message that staff are doing a brilliant job in very challenging circumstances.
Thank you, Alan. Mira, do you manage to calculate the average arrears for each authority?
I think a little bit like how important, but so based on 4.4 million pounds of outstanding debt, by my calculation, we have nationally, England billing authority, English billing authorities are just over 200. So that's about 21 million pounds of outstanding debt average.
Average is 21 million, and so we're probably just below the average. But we're certainly not an outlier in either direction. And we'll continue to strive to do more, but I believe that we've got it outlined. So I know that occasionally I get people contacting me because I think you've been too robust in their collection efforts. Thank you all very much for that. Could I ask for your agreement and recommendations, please? And I'll move on to item 10 and ask Steve to introduce and call in Camilla as and when he wishes. Revenue and capital asset.
Yes, thank you very much, David. I will try and keep it relatively brief and then refer to Omira and I will obviously very happy to answer questions. Obviously, and what we discussed when it comes to covering the reset, the capitalisation request that was offered to a number of authorities, we've actually done a very good job in not requesting as much as initially suspected, and so our overall cost is significantly lower, and that again is very much a result of the excellent work that we have done over the last year, and has actually been commended by the review. Overall, the council ended the year with a net general revenue now turned of 13.97 million against a fine budget of 14676 million, resulting in a net budget of 72610. The key highlights are, of course, higher anticipated savings from the vacancies, reduction in the cost of capital, earlier than assumed delivery of some savings, a number of one-off savings and some one-off grants, and more detailed assessment of these variances is provided in section 2 of the report. Council was able to deliver and exceed its overall planned savings targets by over £200,000. Using our outturn, and as I've already alluded to, we've been able to make fund provision for a number of the risk areas and strengthen our operational and financial resilience, and I'm really keen to ensure that we are financially resilient. And so we have done things such as a 250k cost of living emergency support grant with a cost of £200,000 inflation reserve, and we see what's going on at the moment. We've also set aside £150,000 as a fuel and energy cost reserve. So we know fuel costs are going up, they're going up for businesses, and they're going up for councils just as much as they're going up for our households. We've also allocated £107,000 to general fund reserves. The report does provide quite lots of detail with regards to departments of income and expenditure. The council has delivered just under £30 million of capital investment, primarily in housing regeneration, and again, further detail can be found in section 5 and appendix B of the report. In summary, the council has been able to close its financial accounts for financial year 2021-2022, having delivered all our key services, having made significant progress with the implementation of our recovery and stabilisation programme, reduced our capitalisation requirements by 5.7 billion, and created financial capacity to manage and mitigate the emerging risks, namely inflation costs, pressures, and pressures caused by the imbalance in supply and demand for labour and goods. This is a really, as we've probably said, good start for us, but there's still a number of pressures and concerns, and so we have to act prudently, we have to act with caution, we have to act and make sure that we are financially resilient and can weather some any potential storms that might be gathering. I've got every confidence we can do that because we've done it last year, we've done it the year before, and we've been doing it since we've been in administration. However, on that note, I will once again pass over to Amira and thank her and others for their time in preparing these reports.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing further time from me, and thank you for answering questions.
Thank you very much. Let's see where are. There are none. In that case, can we agree with recommendations? Thank you very much. And move on to Treasury Management. Robert, right, Charles, please.
Thank you, David. Good evening, everybody. Yes, in terms of the meeting we had on scrutiny, I was pleased that to receive, amongst several of the items requested, an updated report on the movement of debt between March 21 and March 22. In fact, I hope perhaps Cabinet members have received the updated schedule. And I think that clearly it shows an improvement in terms of presentation, and some of my criticisms often are about presentation. In fact, as I mentioned in scrutiny, as far as I'm concerned, the detailed workings of the Treasury Management, I've actually been very positive about. But having said that, when I questioned the relationship between the appendix and 4.3, I had been misled at that point, because the interesting thing is that the Appendix A schedules all of the temporary loans taken out during the year 21-22. I think it's over about 51 million. And in terms of the analysis of the full debt movement, there was effectively a virtual similar position repaid. 40 million repaid, actually. 41 million new loans and 40 million repaid. But when I asked for the reconciliation between Appendix A and 4.3, which shows the aging, the maturity structure of debt, you will see that effectively, having gone through that process, we've moved from a situation whereby the under 12 months figure was 5.45, and that has been replaced by a figure of 46 million. Now that's quite dramatic. I mean, you will see that effectively it's a switch between a maturity opening between a year and 2 years, and within the next 12 months. And at the point at which I was actually misled, I was actually applauding the fact that some of the maturity dates have been pushed out. But it does ask a potentially deeper question, and that is just in terms of all of this rolling over of short-term debt. And I will just raise it as an issue because I think that there is a risk in terms of the amount of short-term debt we have, which is not there as long-term debt. Clearly, the interest rates are particularly attractive at the moment, but I would ask whether there's any guarantee that in the future, £46 million of debt can actually be rolled over. I'm not sure that there's a guarantee of that happening. The second point is, of course, that whilst we might currently be suddenly obtaining the benefit of very low interest rates, what is the prospect, just in terms of the interest rates increasing, even if one is able to run them over? I will also just finally make one further point, and that is, with the full analysis of debt movement between March 21 and March 22, you will see in black and white that there is nothing there related specifically to capitalisation. And so just in terms of terminology, on loads of occasions, I have cautioned people in using the terminology in terms of debt arising from capitalisation. There has been no debt arising from capitalisation. You can see it there on the schedule. And therefore, talking about paying back is completely different. The issue of capitalisation was an accounting entry position. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Well, I'm glad that you clarified that, because in the past you've suggested that government bailed us out, and almost suggested they gave us money. Of course, they didn't. Steve.
Thank you, David. With regards to the debt, we have a diverse portfolio, long-term, short-term, fixed and variable, and of course we seek advice from professionals and treasury management. And the investment and borrowing that we've done is under regular review through proposals such as these. I agree with David with regards to capitalisation, but I guess, again, it's like that. So almost semantic word, isn't it? We have to pay it back to the debt, in our mind. It might be an accounting term, it might be another thing, but essentially the government allowed us to borrow money, borrow from our own assets, so we have to pay it back. So one way or another, it's a debt. The government didn't bail us out. It's a debt that we have to pay back because they allowed us to change the terms of what we would normally do, in terms of having borrowed from capital to pay the revenue. So yes, it is an accounting term perhaps, but actually all the government did was allow us to borrow from what we already own. So again, it is a debt, we have to pay it back, it's not about that. On the other issues, and to introduce the report and perhaps cover any questions I haven't answered from Councillor Smart, I will refer to Father.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. In terms of treasury mandate activities, I think Councillor Hall has mainly covered most of the significant issues within the report. I think again, in line with the Local Government Act, we have to produce an annual report every year. And I can assure you that this report in front of you complies with all those regulations as required by CIFA. This report was considered and discussed, and all the recommendations agreed by the scrutiny committee at the American scrutiny committee on the 11th of July and the audit and governance committee yesterday at the meeting. The report, the content of the report itself mainly focuses on capital program, our capital financing requirements, and the overall financial performance. The report looks into a lot of changes that happened during the year, be it through CIFA and the VAR. The level of debt at the moment has moved significantly, has moved slightly, and we've already provided the details of those movements to the scrutiny committee. I think I will stop there, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you all. Any questions? In that case, can I ask you to agree the recommendations? Alongside those, scrutiny committee asks us to agree the annual treasury management, or ask for the annual treasury management report for 2021, and to approve the 2021-22 prudential and treasury indicators, and I'll ask Cabinet to make that with those requests. And I agree with that. Thank you very much. Move now to item 12, which is the Council's Health, Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Strategy 2022 through 2027, and Hannah Result.
Thank you, Chair. This is a very, very important item on the agenda tonight. It will be for all those present and indeed those listening in, because this is the
putting together the final draft for your approval tonight of the Eastbourne homelessness and rough sleeping strategy for the next 5 years, 22 to 27. We're required to update the policy every 5 years. And firstly, I'd like to pay tribute to the staff, Oliver Jones and staff members who put in a tremendous amount of work to pull this document together, which has involved a lot of consultation, starting last autumn through to present day. And obviously the next bit is with the public when we present the policy. So I commend the policy to you. I'm going to quote actually from my own forward in the document, which is Appendix 1, which says reducing the incidence of homelessness and ending rough sleeping is a key priority for this council. And this strategy sets out the approach to achieve this goal over the next 5 years by setting out the framework around preventing homelessness in the first instance, intervening effectively when it does occur, and putting in place sustainable solutions, and that's about house building, which you've got a report on the agenda later on this evening. So the report really draws out the actions around the work that's already gone on in terms of preventing, and we heard earlier on the importance of that work in contributing towards the budgetary side of the council, but it's even more in actually people's lives. And the report brings out some statistics which you'll be already very much aware of, which is just a scale of the number of households who come to the Borough Council on a regular basis, something like 1,400 household inquiries over the last year and over the previous year, which is an awful lot of people, and the council's role in actually helping to prevent those who are at risk of becoming homeless, not becoming homeless by a whole range of interventions, and the work that's carried out by the team for those who are actually found to be homeless into trying to secure them and help them back into accommodation is absolutely critical. So the report and the document actually sets out something of the position we find ourselves in. Let's not be under any illusions that as we move forward, we all know that we're going through a period of enormous challenge for so many families, so many people, and it's likely to get worse with the cost of living pressures that we have at the moment, and that will inevitably lead to more breakdowns and inevitably lead to more people suffering with complex needs and needing help, and will put even more pressure on the housing side of the council. So this document and the strategy that sits behind it and the work stream that sits behind it, which you can read through, is a way of managing that process as best we can to help those people who and those households who find themselves needing help. So I commend the strategy to you, and with your agreement tonight, we can then adopt the strategy and release it for wider public viewing. And I'm just seeing if there's anything else in there. I have to. No, I think I've covered it all. So thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Alan. As you say, this is a very important issue. It's a key challenge, not only for us in Eastbourne, but for most authorities in the country. I'm very grateful to you and to our officers for the work that we've done constructing what is a comprehensive way of mapping out the way forward. Looking to see if there are members speak.
I will try not to speak on every topic this evening, but again, I'm trying to declare a slight conflict of interest, but not particularly because The Orley Bill I'm employed by do work with the Busing Initiative and the housing team, and I think conduct patrols alongside them and have funded the weekend outreach team. But we're a partner, but we're not paid by anybody to do this, so that's why it's not human. Again, really excellent report, and I just wanted to first of all thank Tim and the team, but also the Busing Initiative, the ISI group. I know work very closely with my colleague Luke, with sort of fortnightly meetings discussing key sites and key areas and key issues and key individuals, and I think that partnership working, bringing people together has really had benefits for all involved, and I'm particularly grateful as well. I know it's because sometimes it's kind of we have to really support those who speak up. You know, nobody when they grow up wants to be homeless, and often it's through consequences, it's through factors outside their control, it's health reasons, it's finances, and personally we're probably going to see a lot more of it coming down the line, unfortunately. But actually, at the same time, I was really pleased and grateful for the work that Tim and the team did with regards to when we were having out of town placements, and the work that we did with regards to that and raising that as an issue and challenging that at multiple levels, and working cross-party with that as well. And again, I thank other members for their work with regards to that, because that has had a real impact on us, and I think, you know, we've got a very limited budget, we've got a very limited finance, and we have to prioritise, if you like, those who are from our own community, and those who choose to place in Eastbourne have to take responsibility for their housing placements in their homeless community. So again, I know Tim did an outstanding job with that, and I know we're now on a very low figure, indeed pre-COVID in terms of pricing placements. So that work really needs to be commended for what they've done, and the robust approach that we all took with regards to the attitudes of Bryson and Hove City Council. But a really good report, really encouraging, and what I'm really impressed again is using those new methods and those new technologies that I know the team have invested in training to actually start looking at prevention. Is far better than cure, and it's more timely, it's more, perhaps it's difficult to do. But again, going back to that thing, if we know somebody might be in trouble, we suspect they might be in trouble, it's far better for us to reach out to them early, where we can do more preventative measures and stop that homeless application, than waiting until we get that awful call from our contact centre. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, as you say, nobody wants to be homeless. And as you speak, everyone has their own individual story, and you listen to some of those stories and you realise just how quickly a spiral of events can lead people who are one day in work and live with a roof over their heads to find themselves on the street. What we want to do is try and help them to get back into society and to live in accommodation. Often that will require additional support as well, and not only would I commend the RSI initiative, but also the voluntary organisations in the town that work to those ends. Becky.
Again, I want to say, Councillor Shuttleworth, this is the sort of thing that really excites me. It's ambitious. We do have a problem with homelessness. We have a problem in Eastbourne with people coming from all parts of the country to beg on our streets. And what we need to do is treat them with a trauma-informed approach, which I love this document because I'm thinking about the third line down on page 407, organised delivery of a trauma-informed approach, not to treat homeless people as criminals. They are people that have got there through poverty, through sometimes a destructive background, and that's what I love about this document. A lot of the priorities that I have as community safety, like I've mentioned to you, would align with yours, and I look forward to seeing funding applications from you for community safety to try and support you in these outcomes. But well done to you and Oliver and everyone on this initiative, and also to the Biz that work so hard on our streets to make sure that our homeless community is safe.
Thank you, Becky. Any other points, contributions? We happen to agree with recommendations. Thank you. We move to item 14, which is the review of the planning policy and licensing for houses and multiple occupation. Jane, would you like to please?
I thought you said.
Sorry, I think I wasn't speaking clearly enough.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the review document and the fact that £25,000 has been found to support robust evidence about HMOs in East Bourne. Of the 305 licensed HMOs which we have at the moment, an awful lot of them are clustered in particular wards, including your ward, Stephen, Devonshire ward, and there are issues around that causing problems for residents. And also, because we had a backlog of the inspection programme, which is now reinstated but catching up, not all of them have been inspected, understandably over COVID, and I know a new person has been employed to undertake this. But I'm concerned about the lack of information about the unlicensed HMOs as well, which can be up to 4 people. And this is a concern because if we don't have any evidence and any information about it, we can't manage those situations or support the management or help the people in them. So that's one area that I've got great concern about. Also, the fact that we don't have discretionary additional licensing scheme here in Eastbourne, where managers of HMOs can actually apply discretion, voluntarily to put themselves up for some sort of licensing scheme. And so I'm concerned that so many people who are in small HMOs are falling beneath the radar, and there's no council inspection, and therefore it's difficult to quantify how much support they need, and also difficult to indicate how many social factors are affected by the locations of these, because we have no information and they're not accessible. So we don't know how well they're managed, so we can't really give it, and we can't help because we haven't got anything to manage. Because, as you know, I was a school inspector, and we said if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, basically. So I think in terms of forming some sort of register of small and unlicensed HMOs, that might be something we might look towards in the future. Also, possibly introducing a discretionary licensing, additional licensing scheme here, because without those 2 factors, we don't really have the robust evidence that £25,000 is helping us to gather. And it's just taking the welcome review document a bit further and seeing where we can actually help. Because as a member of planning, when a new HMO may come up for planning, we only know the locations of the licensed HMOs in that area, and there are some areas, including Devonshire in particular, where there are really too many within quite close proximity to each other, and there are enormous problems for some of the residents there, and also for some of the residents of the HMOs. So I'd like to take it a little bit further and move towards a register and discretionary additional licensing. And there's just the points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. I think we'll share your concerns about the proliferation of smaller HMOs, and we need to find a deal with that.
Also, where Councillor Swansborough will have a particular interest in this area, that's the share. Yes, carry both out there.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I'm really pleased for listening to what Jane has said, because obviously the report actually is setting about to tackle those issues. It's recognising that actually we need to gather back evidence in order to make the decisions, in order to tackle some of the smaller HMOs and the concentration in Devonshire Ward and elsewhere. So that's what the idea of this, behind this report, is pulling together, if you like, some strands from the development of the local plan and the HMO side of things, and marry the 2 together so that in future we've got more arms to our strings to our boat, probably, rather than to actually to tackle
some of these issues, and to have the evidence which we're required to have in order to drive that planning policy through. So, in actual fact, the sort of areas that you're talking about are absolutely what this is all about. So, I would commend the report to members, and as you've stated, that it does involve the allocation of £25,000 to allow that work to be carried out and to give us the evidence that we're all looking for. So I think it's actually a really welcome report, and one I think we're all on the same page for. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I go to page 118, number 1.3. This is a key thing. HMOs form an important part of the housing mix within an area as they increase the range and mix of accommodation. So the first thing you have to get over is that HMOs are a bad thing, because they're a good thing, and for a lot of people who wouldn't otherwise have any housing, they're a very, very good thing. The problem is that if you want to do anything with them and you approach it with an open mind, you need to have the evidence. And we do not have the evidence. If we were to say there are too many here, or there's not enough there, or whatever, we don't have a basis for doing that. So we need to get the evidence together. But I wouldn't want to, I understand what Jamie is saying, but I wouldn't want to prejudge the outcome before we get the evidence, because otherwise we'll start before horse. I don't know, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree that it's important to get the evidence. I think that in the same way as we had a cumulative impact policy with regard to licensed establishments, that you can find yourself with too many within a particularly defined area. That's something we need to be wary of. Over the years, I've seen both good and bad HMOs. And I can remember a time before we had any sort of registration scheme on going into a number of larger HMOs being what I found the registration certainly helped in that respect for those larger sites. So I'm aware that there are a growing number of smaller HMOs, but the ones I've come across almost by accident, insofar as I've seen them, are actually very well managed. But until you have some way of being able to measure that and you collect the evidence, you can't say that with great certainty. Steve, did you? Okay.
I very much do, and this is very much a report that I welcome, and those that joined me at 10 sets of plan meeting today, and others have been saying there will be a report coming to Cabinet to discuss what the possibilities and practicalities might be. And this is the start of that, so I'm delighted to have been able to help to deliver this, and I want to thank Lisa Rawlinson for what she's done with regards to this, the effort, the attention that she's put in place, because it isn't, there's a long process with regards to anything we do with this, because it involves the plan, it involves, if we go in the Article 4 direction, it involves Secretary of State's approval, it involves other aspects with regards to this, so there's not going to be a quick fix or an early solution. And I actually want to really reinforce what Councillor Swansburg has just said as well, which is there are some very good HMOs in town. There are some excellent HMOs in town. I'm delighted that many of them are within my ward, and they add vitality, they add numbers, they add people, and I have absolutely no issue with well-run, good HMOs. And actually, contrary to what I've been doing recently, I have once supported an HMO application for you, Upton as opposed to Devonshire, where it was above a shop. And it was above a shop because they converted it, but they were good size, decent rooms, decent accommodation, history of being well managed, and I could instantly see that that was a really good framework in which to progress, and very good already adopted in other authorities where they've taken place, selected licensing and various other bits and pieces. And so through my conversations with them, they're saying, this is something that you could really explore and get something out of. So no issue whatsoever, because I have been attacked before with well-run, good HMOs. They provide much needed accommodation God's sake, we've just spoken about the fact that there's homelessness, housing issues and problems. Where I have an issue is that, frankly, Devonshire and certain streets of Devonshire, we have over 70% of licensed HMOs within Devonshire for the whole borough. And we also have a huge number of unlicensed HMOs as well. Well run, not an issue. Not an issue at all. But sometimes what's frustrating for an increasing number of residents, both with HMOs and their neighbours, is that it's the basic thing. It's where you put rubbish. And so you suddenly have 5 or 6 rubbish bins in the middle of the road next to the fish and chip restaurant. And there's no provision within some of these applications for them to provide waste areas or waste points or access to waste bins. And it sounds silly, but for people who live next to it, and there's overflowing bins because they've got one bin to share between 5 households, it's just not practical and it's not fair. With regards to this as well, the other thing is we've got housing targets to meet. HMOs do not count towards housing targets. And so we've got ambitious, big housing targets we have to meet nationally. HMOs do not count towards them. So I really welcome this. It is the first step, I think, of a longer term process, and if people are listening, I know I've spoken to various chairs and various residents and various individuals, and they're saying, can't we do a quick point? I will keep saying, let's get the evidence. I encourage residents and groups who are interested in this to provide evidence once we have the means to do so that we can have a really good, balanced discussion as to what the impact are of HMOs, where they're suitable, where perhaps they're not, and what we can do to make it the best experience of living in Eastbourne as possible. Because I would like a system where potentially there's licensing positions, whatever, but I want to see what the various options are. I want us to take a balanced and appropriate approach. So I really welcome the work that we've done there as well with Jane, and I know for me there's certain areas, and indeed, frankly, University of Brighton in a couple of years' time, God knows what will happen with some of those accommodations, but indeed a lot of those student accommodations are within both my ward and indeed yours. And again, I can see that being an additional increase, an additional rise, and that's potentially not an issue, but it's something that's coming down the line and we need to assess and risk manage it more than anything else. So really welcome what's being laid down, really welcome the commitment to seek further evidence and information so that we can then build that case and make informed decisions to how to address this as other seaside towns and city towns have done so. So yeah, really, really great work so far. Long may it continue.
Thank you, Sue Clark.
Thank you. I was just here listening to Jane, and I suddenly thought, blimey, my house before we bought it 40 years ago was an organisation home. The only saving grace that half the people lived in there were councils. But no, I just want to support what Jen was saying, because I think what she's saying is so important. It is the unlicensed ones that we are having, not the problems with, but that are springing up all over the town. The orange houses that Student Haven have got are coming into every street in Devonshire now, next door to each other. They are well managed, but what happens when the students go? Are they still going to let them out on the same way, or will the management developers disappear as rogue traders come in? I would just like to say thank you to the planning department for their very robust way of dealing with Savoy Court. For those of you who don't know, Savoy Court's up top end of Cavendish Place, and it was wanted to be turned into an HMO. We got planning permission for flats, which we were quite happy with. It's actually in a tourist area, and we were objecting to it there. Residents were objecting, and the tourism team were objecting. The planning committee turned it down, and they had to appeal. Can I just say that the planning, I'm not always a great one in inspector planning, but the gentleman came and did a team briefing with us all online for a whole day, and then came and visited
was so robust in his way he talked to both our side and the applicant side. And luckily he came down in our favour, but that sets a precedent, I feel, for some of our refusals now. So well done to the planning team, put that back in, please. But I definitely support James' ideas there.
Thank you. Unless there are any other comments, can I ask for your agreement to the recommendations, but also you're seeking comments from the scrutiny committee, so could we also note the request from the scrutiny committee for the following item to be added to the committee's work programme, and that is the consultants commission to provide robust evidence to support and justify any future decision on action regarding HMO planning policy and licensing shall provide an interim update to scrutiny at its meeting on the 28th of November. We note that as well, please. Steve.
I'm more than happy with the addition, but I would just suggest that we don't quite know how long consulting and commissioning and bits and pieces, and it might not be experts, it might be done internally. So rather than, don't get me wrong, I'll be the one fighting this one to get it done as quickly as possible, but I'd rather get it done quickly and efficiently with the right team than commit to saying it's got to be got to it and better sort of day.
I understand what you're saying. It's better to get it right than just get it done. So, that's the debate out, but save it to your return. Thank you. Unless anybody disagrees with that, can we move? Thank you. And we move now to item 14, the methodology for collecting monitoring fees in connection with section 106 green 10.
Thank you, Chair. And just with your indulgence, Chair, can I just mention that I didn't actually get an answer to my question about bin deliveries, because I'll take that up with Councillor Swansborough after the certainly welcome the additional monitoring of S106 agreements. But I'd like to be sure that this will actually mean there's more enforcement, if you like. I mean, we often see the case where a development is built, the trigger number of properties are occupied, but either whatever was in 106 has not been delivered or isn't delivered to an adequate standard, and it can be very, very difficult to, once you get to that point, to get those enforced, if you like, and I'd like to see a commitment to more enforcement. And also, just one on this, actually also applies to Agenda 15, it states that the charging schedule will be reviewed annually. Will that be a recommendation from officers will be approved by Cabinet, or just the process? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll bring Colin in a second, but I believe it's that would be part of the annual review of these charges. Colin.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it's quite, to me, it's quite straightforward on this one. Is for a long time, people have been planning to do development, being subsidised by us to some extent. I think we were obviously as a planning consultant, we were concerned that people wouldn't come here to develop if we do things to put them off. But actually, the amount of charges that we're talking about in relation to the size of the scheme is minimal, absolutely minimal. There's still an issue that people are getting planning consent and then not developing. But I don't think that this is going to affect it one way or the other. So I'd obviously recommend it. The extra source of income won't be massive, but it'll be something.
Thank you, Colin. Any comments? All the recommendations? Agreed. Thank you. Colin, I'm going to come straight back to you for the item 15, which is the revised planning pre-application charging schedule.
That's just what I just said. I think it's a very, very similar state of affairs on this, in that we are going to charge people on a proper scale for things that they haven't had to pay for before. So I recommend it.
Comments, anybody? Happy? agree. And Shama, I'd like you back please to talk to us about housing development update. But could I ask you and ask Cabinet to avoid any comments which relate to pink makers, which is the financial detail? Thank you. If we need to, if we really need to address that, we can move to confidential session.
No. I'm happy to see that we're bringing in hopefully a lot more development, and therefore that's great to see. Although at Appendix 1, which is the list of how many dwellings we would have, there's 100 that refer to Bedford Well Road. Now, it's a minor concern in terms of the whole paper, but I'm concerned about Bedford Well. I believe that significant amount of work has been done and significant expenditure incurred, and we're simply, it feels like mothballing it, better phrase, because we've suddenly realised that we don't have a viable business case, or so it is. I can't understand why we would start and expend quite this sort of money, and the reason why I know a little bit about it is because I was on CAG when it was being discussed earlier in the year, and it seemed like a very challenging development, and lots of other builders, developers have had their hands burnt, and we seem to be now in a position where we're kind of pulling back and waiting for some kind of support from the government or Homes England. And I understand that Homes England were just not happy to wait around when they had other projects available in which they could invest. So quite like to understand why this is the case, and another concern is that if we don't properly keep it in some kind of an order, before we know it, there'll be weeds growing out of that building again, and it'll become a little bit like a bandstand again, where there's deterioration, and so that's my concern.
It's not a minor concern to me, it's a major concern. I've been hoping that the government will come forward with the incentives that they've been promising, and they haven't actually managed it yet through Homes England. But Alan, would you like to say on?
Thank you, and thank you for your comments. I'm going to talk in a moment about the programme in totality and issues around that, but I will start with Bedford Well Road as that's been raised. And it is true that it's a scheme that involves providing 100 affordable homes for people who desperately need those homes here in Eastbourne. We talked earlier on about the importance of that, and when you consider that in terms of sites, certainly local authority sites within the town, because of the fact that we're bound by the sea on one side, the downs, the Pevensey levels and the borough boundary, we have to seek out sites within the town, and this is a brownfield site. It's a site that the council own, and a site that they've been working with all parties on this council for some time to get the scheme to a point where it is shovel ready. We've reached that point now. In the bigger picture, what you need to understand is that with all the different projects, and they're listed tonight, the way the process works is that when they reach the point where they need an affordable housing grant input, which comes through Homes England, comes effectively from the government to get the scheme going, and it's normal, and that's part of the business case for doing these developments. And we've got to that point. Now, I appreciate that Homes England may have challenges at the moment. In fact, the whole building construction side nationally has problems at the moment. I don't go through all of that, but I do get that. But we are bidding for an important site in Eastbourne. Alongside that, I just refer you to 2 points in the document here. On 2.5, on page 151, the report brings out the significance of obtaining government funding, such as through the Affordable Homes Programme, which I've just described. And also, the government has announced that they are going to have a brownfield funding as part of the Levelling Up white paper to add additional monies to be able to provide monies towards projects up and down the country. And I welcome that, and they talked in the white paper about a sum of 1.6 billion. Sadly, they currently are only drawing down a relatively small proportion of that monies in this first phase, and that means across the country, lots of schemes, not just in Eastbourne, that are waiting to hear whether they're going to get money from the normal affordable homes budget through Homes England, or whether they're going to get a share of the monies on the brownfield funding, which, you know, I welcome that from the government, but we're not seeing the money. Now, as things stand here in Eastbourne, we're ready to go. In fact, I wrote a very comprehensive letter to Caroline Ansell, a Member of Parliament, some 2 or 3 months ago now, but a while ago, setting out some of the challenges and setting out and basically asking for her support. And I know that she has done some lobbying on behalf of the council, and I will be writing again to her. I've had a brief response from her in the last day or two, and I will be writing to reinforce the importance of getting some of that funding to allow that scheme to get up and running here in Eastbourne. So I welcome your comments, Sharma. It is actually our #1 scheme. It's the one that we want to get on and we want to deliver. And as with all the other schemes that we have, a key element of that is always the affordable housing money that comes in at this stage in the process. It's what triggered the scheme down the road at the Southfields Road. It's what's, you know, makes a contribution to all of our schools. So it is absolutely, and any support from any councillor here that helps put some pressure on, particularly on your own government, to actually get this funding, get it moving, so that we can actually make a start on that site will be absolutely welcome. The bigger picture, obviously, as you've already intimated, this is part of a scheme of a lot of schemes at the moment, a lot of work going on, and if you add together all the completed homes, the acquisitions policy that we've got, the construction projects that are working at the moment, it will be a lot of new homes that are desperately needed in the town. I mean, if we get 100, at Bedford Road, it would be something in the order of 288 new homes. And the other aspect of that I think is really important is that we're trying to drive the sustainability agenda as well, with modern methods of construction. And you will all be pleased to hear, if you don't know already, that the most recent development of the Foundry in Langley Road has been shortlisted in the social housing category nationally, in the top 10 developments nationally, and it is in line for some sort of award there. So that's very much part of our agenda. We want to promote, certainly in the current crisis over energy costs, we want to promote new homes that are energy tight, if you like, and are going to produce buildings that are not only good to live in, but are also financially viable for people. Another area I would say that perhaps you can give us a hand with is that at the moment, because of the government's right to buy, that leads to reductions in the social housing properties that we've got in the town at the moment. And then there's another area that we're concerned about, not about the scheme, but about actually councils being given the monies back to be able to replace houses that are sold. I ought to mention the report draws out particular schemes, the development of 20 new homes in Cavalry Crescent. If you look at the recommendations, we are asked tonight to approve that particular project and the business case for that. I should also draw you, and that will produce as 5 one-bedroom flats, 9 two-bedroom flats, and 5 three-bedroom flats, and a 4-bedroom house. I should also draw your attention to, on number 3 on the recommendations, Fort Lane, another construction, which will be a modular construction, and is another part of that programme. And also on number 5, being asked to enter into an access agreement to enable the council to use the framework agreement for provision of modular housing. This is linked to a particular group which you'll be familiar with, Boutique Modern, who specialise in high quality sustainable housing, and it's an arrangement where we can speed up the process of appointing a contractor and save significant costs in so doing, and working closely with that particular organisation. So I commend the recommendations. I absolutely take on board the importance of getting the Bedford Well Road project moving. It's something that we are all committed to, and I hope that every councillor is committed to, and look forward to working with our Member of Parliament to give us support in making that case to Homes England, and indeed to get a slice of the brownfield monies which the government have already announced. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Comments, questions? Are we happy to accept the recommendation? Sorry, Beth.
Sorry, just quickly, I think given the background of what these recommendations are set against, which is that we've had to revise the entire budget over the last few years, I think it's prudent to wait for the brownfield monies, and that's what I want to say really. What other choice do we have?
The government have made it clear that they want to see more housing development. They explained they want to see social housing development, and they were, I thought, ready to put money into it, but not yet, it appears, to the degree that we require. We will continue working on that. Happy to agree with recommendations. We move now into confidential sessions, so the recordings can now be switched on. Thank you. One more time, I can see